Welcome back, you filthy exiles, and this is part 2 of the build update series for my Lightning Tendrils witch. Now, obviously, there were some negative comments in the last video around POB distortion, so I've addressed that this time around. We'll just turn down the dialogue and get into the video. Alright, so basically, to get around that, I just simply switched it to eccentricity. So, obviously, Peeps had an issue with the escalation. Peeps had an issue with the way that eccentricity works. So escalation is a flat modifier. So basically we're at 62.9 million DPS based on flat modifier. There's no upper or lower or big hit and low hit like the standard Lightning Tendril skill. On that basis, this is a lot of damage. As you see in the B-roll, it's done feared. It's done basically everything now. Can it do Ubers? If it can do Ubers, there's a pretty good chance it can do feared as long as you know how to do the boss fights. Pretty much just, it almost face tanks everything. There are definitely things that kill it, but Mage Blood will fix that eventually, and that's basically where we're up to. So we're min-maxed to the point where we really need Mage Blood. Now, a few things, we can definitely get a better Profane Wand. Obviously been farming a lot of stuff. And I'll do a video on invitation farming, which is how I started generating currency on this too, because I just wanted to nuke bosses for a little while. So definitely you need a better wand, but basically we're pretty much, you know, we've done a fair few upgrades and I'll talk through those as well as some of the other nuances with the build. Another thing that was pointed out to me is that Mastermind of Discord won't work. And that's because we're using negative lightning stacking with Doriani's. So the way that we get around that is we just remove exposure on the gloves and we put hinder, which just provides more lockdown on enemies as well. But outside of that, also we got lucky with some corrupt rolls, 41% increased damage on the chest, which was pretty wild. And then obviously we don't have a Mage Blood or anything like that just yet. And we could also corrupt the Aegis Aurora and get a better rolled one, things like that. Anathema's corrupted. You don't want to corrupt a Vivisect because it'll take away the socket, most likely. And yeah, basically this is where we're at. So anyway, let's get into the video, talk about the POB config and everything else, and then talk through all the gear and all the changes as we go through it. There'll be a POB in the description below and a link to the part 1 video. If you want to run eccentricity, still incredibly powerful. You're going to nuke absolutely everything. This one though is going to nuke things just a little bit quicker. And I think this is 140C now. So yeah, overall, both versions of Lightning Tendrils will work on this setup. Other things too, you could basically switch out any lightning skill with this setup and rejig it out of channeling and bring it into like crit with with spell echo and things like that. And you'll get like a stat that sits around 15 to 25 million on hit spell damage. And this setup is really tanky on top of that. So basically any lightning skill will work on it. The other thing I also did was I switched out the Arcanist brand and I set it up with Punishment, Temporal Chains, and Assassin's Mark because we already stack negative lightning. Running Elemental Weakness and Conductivity make no sense. So basically we get a huge damage buff to low life enemies with Punishment. And so I do have that ticked on in the POB and we'll talk about that. But basically when enemies get to 50%, they qualify as low life. So that gives us an extra huge damage buff. So 50% of the time you'll be doing an absolutely absurd amount of damage, in particular on bosses. And the other thing too is because it's cast when damage taken, if Assassin's Mark is on the enemy with an Anathema doing spells, then you'll be able to sustain your power charges as well. I don't have frenzy charges or anything in the build. And the other thing that we're missing in the damage calculations is the Perkle's Toe. I did try to adjust that with the companion mods, but I'm not that good with companions in this game and AGs when doing POB. The other thing I also made changes to was around the Merc. So one of the biggest issues was my Merc survivability. We've basically addressed that at this stage simply by getting the reses capped and obviously Chaos Res. And we got its regen at 1400. And to basically do that, we just rejigged all the gearing and got some really good stats. We do need to get Culling Strike on this setup. And also there's some other things like we could have Sapped Ground as well, which would also provide a bit more damage reduction for us too. So that's actually a few other things coming to mind that we could put onto the build to make the build even better. Anyway, let's get into the video and talk about all the gearing and stuff like that. Okay, so as per normal, we're going to talk through the configurations page, and this is where we can pull out if I'm BSing my path of building tree and any other information that I might be omitting. So basically, Got Soul of the Brine King. The reason why is the freeze avoidance. At this point, it's 100%. This is not my preferable one to have, but it is good for taking down Crystal Kings. Though you don't really need it unless you're doing Crystal King. And we're going to deal with this down the track anyway with our gem setups. Soul of Tukahama, when we're stationary, fizz damage reduction and regeneration. And obviously time spent stationary is 5, and part of the reason for that is like how channeling works, but we also run Nature's Patience, which requires that as well. If you wanted to adjust the EHP for the block rate, you could just click this off and the EHP goes down to 200%, assuming that you never really block. That's not real. And people will do that to say, well, that's the true EHP, but that's not the real EHP, because the real EHP is how your build actually functions. So we leave that unticked. Now, power charges, we generate this from our Anathema in particular. So if we go to Anathema, and we'll have a look at that. 14% chance to gain a power charge when you cast a curse spell, and this occurs when we cast when damage taken when we get hit. Also, we generate power charges from our skill setup with our Assassin's Mark. So the way Assassin's Mark works is curse enemies have 100% chance to grant a power charge when slain. Curse enemies have 5% chance to grant a power charge when hit. Because we have a high cast rate, that power charge gain when hit will basically proc very easily. So we'll generate that on bosses. So we can sustain that on bosses very easily. If it's not enough, there's another way to get around it. You basically respec out 4 points. You go down into Arcane Sanctuary and you grab the gain a power charge each second while you channel the spell if you're concerned that it's not consistent enough, but I feel like it is. Arcane Surge, we literally run it in the gem setup. Blast Charge active, yes. Consecrated Ground, we've got a Bottle of Faith now. That's where that comes from. Channeling, we're running a channeling skill. We channel for like 5 seconds. Convergence comes from the Ascendancy point, and this is pretty much always up when you're fighting bosses, so this comes from Heart of Destruction. And then basically, we've got our Have You Cursed Enemy recently? Yep. And then Infusion is active when you start channeling. Now, the thing that people will get the shits about will be because I've got Sigil of Power on 4. So if you don't like it, put it to 1. Don't know what else to say. I've got it on 4 because I like it on 4. Is the enemy on low life? This is a synergy with the punishment curse, which will happen when they hit you. You can take this off, it's still 47 million DPS. And then beyond that point, we have brittle ground. This is built into our boots. So we drop brittle ground when we move around. And then basically we shock the enemy. On average, I clock in at about 55 to 65%. Again, if you don't like it, just change it. Seriously. Like, you guys have got the POB. And then basically, we don't have Intimidate. We don't need that. Is the enemy on Consecrated Ground? Yes, that's coming from the Bottled Faith. Obviously, this is Guardian and Pinnacle. So then we have Lightning Resistance is set to negative 181. We make no other changes here. And the reason why is because we have our Doriani set up and our stat is negative 181 on our Merc. So this is exactly how it's set up. But that's basically it for the config tree. That's all the ins and outs that you really need to understand. There's no like double tick on the lightning tendrils or anything like that. It just is what it is, flat damage as it is. Negative mana will be showing here because we have to represent the Merc gear, which has Wrath, Zealotry, and Enfeeble on it as well. Enfeeble doesn't have any effect for some weird reason, but definitely the Zealotry and the Wrath are very big damage modifiers that we need from the Merc to make this build tick. Okay, so for gearing on this build, I made not quite a few changes, but I did make some adjustments to the build. Obviously, previously it was level 88 or level 89, and now we're a little higher. So let's have a talk through it. So basically, actually thinking about it, we didn't make too many adjustments, but Helm, essentially we have reservation efficiency and cast speed, still pretty much exactly the same. Aegis Aurora, same, but we need a corrupted variant with something that reduces damage. Crit damage reduction, something like that would be preferable. Dragon's Flight, same deal. Lightning Tendrils is the +3 that we need. Now, I've adjusted this in the POB to take it into account because it doesn't seem to calculate it for some weird reason. Our chest piece, we really lucked out and we managed to corrupt an Incandescent Heart to increase 41% damage. Unfortunately, this does drive the price of the build up by quite some amount of currency. So minimum, these go for between 10 to 25 div at the moment. So it's quite a rare chest and a very good one at that. Obviously, we need 4 blue, 2 red to really make this pop off. Now, also, we've got our Profane 1. And my preference is to run Profane 1 because of the implicit cast speed. And we do have increased cast speed on it, which we sort of tuned up a little bit. The main stats you basically need is increased lightning damage to spells, crit multi, things like that. If you can get any other stats around, like crit chances, less needed because this build sort of deals with that pretty easily itself. But yeah, basically you want cast speed, flat spell damage, flat lightning damage, crit multi, and plus to spell and skill gems at the end of the day, and lightning damage to spells, which we can definitely get a better one, but yeah, we just gotta work a little bit more for it. And then obviously we're running Anathema. Now we have a corrupted variation of the Anathema now. I don't know why my head moved there. Now basically this has 15% increased aura effect of Discipline. You could also get like other auras like Zealotry, things like that is going to increase your damage. I chose Discipline because I wanted to get as close to 7,000 ES as absolutely possible. Then our other ring is still the same, Vivisect. 31 strength and dexterity roll, and this can be varied between 31 to 35. So this is a relatively low roll. Ideally, we need a better roll to be able to use, you know, our next leveled up gems. But yeah, at this point, we're capped on level 18 until we can overcome that issue with attributes. Then beyond that, we've got our gloves. So basically, as I said in the initial start to the video, we changed out the exposure because we don't have exposure. So Mastermind and Discord is a useless node. Now, some people are trying to say, well, you could just take other nodes or whatnot. The reality is yeah, you could do that. But the problem is getting to the point that you have on the Ascendancy for Harder Destruction. That's a really expensive Forbidden Flesh and Flame setup, whereas Bastion of Elements was relatively affordable. So that's the reason why I made that decision at this point. Yep, we have a dead Ascendancy point, but we get the Convergence node that we need to do huge amounts of damage, which more than compensates for that because the Elementalist is already by nature strong. Our belt then is basically just fire and lightning resistances and increased regeneration rate. This is one of the biggest things that gives me a huge amount of survivability. I think my regen sits pretty heavy. 790 when we run a flask, 996. And then obviously we have Bottle of Faith. It goes up to 1300 plus the Aegis Aurora makes it hit nearly 2000 per second, which is very strong. And then my boots, I do have gained 4% of physical damage as extra lightning. This does increase damage. If you want to find out by how much, just go into the POB, have a play around. Obviously, we have Brittle Ground as well, and we're also going to roll Sap Ground on the boots as well for the Merc. So the Merc drops Sap Ground, which is going to be really good for delving. Flask-wise, I left all the flasks exactly the same as the last video, except I didn't need my Lightning Flask because we have stun immunity because of our casting setup. So I basically use Bottle of Faith, and you just want to make sure you got a good crit chance roll and a good damage roll. And yeah, this is pretty much going to be a huge damage dealing flask. Now, as far as sustaining this, there's a few ways we could go. We could switch the belt out and we could sustain it that way. Or we could just run Mage Blood and cap out everything with our other flask, which is what the plan is at this stage. And then we just have a lot of uptime on Bottled Faith as needed. So that's basically the plan. But yeah, anyway, that's the gearing for this. So a few changes here and there, but overall the gearing's actually not too different at this point. Okay, so for the gem setups, this is where I've made the biggest amount of change. So at this stage, we've got Flame Golem, Stone Golem, Ice Golem, and we've got our Lightning Golem. Now this is all like 20%ed at level 20 now. So these are doing a fair bit of damage. And if you don't know how this works, then it basically runs off of Leisure the Primordial, which means that they automatically recast as they are needed. Now, beyond that point, in the wand, we're running Faster Casting, Sigil of Power, and Frostblink Wintry Blast, which I have at 2120. You don't need that. I just have it because. And I think the price of this is absurd. Yeah, it's like 4 div, but I really lucked out with that one. In the chest piece, this is the biggest change. So I'm now running Lightning Tendrils of Escalation. The reason why is because, number one, people complaining about the up and down DPS. I'm mindful there is like an average blend of DPS, but it is still very high. Outside of that, Escalation is just straight up flat damage based on flat scaling of crit. So there's no 500% multiplier at that point, and it does huge AoE. So arguably now with the changes to the skill gems and everything in the patch notes, this is a significantly better setup than what I was running previously. As you can see, it obliterates everything. There is no question about how this works. It is flat damage, right? That is what it is. There is no other multiplier outside of the changes that I have in here. And in the very first part of the video, I talk about all of those sort of things. There's no frenzy charges. If you can get them, even more damage. endurance charges to survivability. But yeah, basically, if you've got an issue with that, I don't know how, because it is what it is at that point. But anyway, beyond that point, we're running Empower, Inspiration, Arcane Surge, Infused Channeling, which got a bit bricked, and our increased critical damage support. Now, in our shield, we're running Molten Shell, Automation, and Clarity at level 5, specifically level 5, just to keep the reservation down so we have enough pool to cast our curses. And then basically in our gloves, we've got Cast Within Damage Taken, Punishment, Temporal Chains, and Assassin's Mark. And the reason why is I just wanted to automate this build to make it as easy on the hands as possible. So really you're just holding down one button the entire time and doing huge AoE and just wiping out everything. It's just super powerful. In the boots, we've got Enlighten level 3, Haste and Determination, and Tempest Shield. Now, in respect to the pathing tree, it's pretty much the same as the last video. So if you watch the last video, definitely that's what it is. In the POB, I've got this ticked on because it's level 95. I'm only level 94 at the moment, so we'll do this in the next level. But basically, the changes that we made were pretty much about taking Annihilation, and also we had a couple of points in here which we then put into Practice Caster, which is a huge damage modifier. Outside of that, there are no other changes to the tree. It's exactly as it was in the previous video and in the previous POB. It didn't really need to change. And this is a template tree too, so you can take this and use this on other spells. If you're going to use it on other spells, you just literally get rid of the Unwavering Focus and casting nodes, and that will allow you to do all sorts of weird and wacky stuff with this build setup. Obviously, we've also added Nature's Patience to the setup as well, so we still have a little bit of an issue with Corrupted Blood, and now and again I need to switch the Watcher's Eye out for our Corrupted Blood node there. Also, the significant thing to note on the Watcher's Eye is you don't necessarily need the ES amount, but the block attack is definitely very useful when you have Determination. So that is definitely something that you should try and aspire to on your Watcher's Eye. Outside of that, the Sanities still go as per previously. So we've got Mastermind of Discord, Heart of Destruction, Shaper of Storms, and Legion of the Primordial. We also have Bastion of Elements now because we added in Forbidden Flesh and Flame for Bastion of Elements. A lot of people are like, oh, why don't you do this Forbidden Flesh and Flame and this combo and this combo? The reason why is currency. Like some of the Profane Bloom one, just for like the Flame variant, is 40 div, and that's very expensive. And the thing I like about my builds is they are affordable for the everyday player. Like you just do a little bit of farm and delve, things like that. It's achievable if you're working full time and stuff like that. If you want to totally no life or get really lucky with drops, 100% you should put in there whatever you think. As it stands with this setup though, you can face tank Shaper Beams for a period of time without worrying too much, which makes it definitely very lucrative. And Legion of the Primordial is a lot better for delve. We already do insane DPS. So like anything that you add to this now is just pushing that stat up further at the end of the day. So right now I'm pretty happy with where the build is, but you know, there's plenty of improvements that we can make to the Merc and other gear and things like that without having to spend on exuberantly costed Forbidden Flesh and Flame jewels that are very uncommon. Okay, so the last thing here is the Merc. So one of the things that I noticed is my Merc was dropping off a bit as I was playing through, and one of the reasons why is I had not res capped the Merc, and my Chaos res on the Merc was very bad. This is actually how I'm able to do level 15 sims now, because I fixed this, so it's not really a major issue. So pretty much all I did, I just got a really good helm. You can't put grave binds on Fallen Reverends, unfortunately, so we did have to get a set of corrupted gloves, which ended up being brick gloves, which have curse enemies with enfeeble on hit, and obviously that curses enemies with enfeeble when this character puts absolution down. And because absolution's so far reaching, basically everything's always enfeebled all the time, which is really useful. Now, basically beyond that point, we did put like a better wand on it. We do have negative lightning rings, which I am very well aware are expensive. We have a Percival's Toe. Didn't really think about whether or not anoints work with Percival's Toe. I would say that they don't, but they also might. You never know. And then Doriani's Prototype obviously is the belt we're going with a Immortal Flesh. What we should actually do is put a Corrupted Immortal Flesh with like a Determination buff, and that will buff up our armor, which will make us less susceptible to physical damage. Our shield, we've got increased spell block, but also fire and cold res, like in the mountains, to get us over the res capping issue. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it for the entire build. So this is my setup. And this Fallen Reverend, by the way, is not super, it is rare, but I've run into at least 2 other Wrath Zealotry rolled Fallen Reverends. If you just run enough maps, you'll find one eventually. I'd recommend getting Zealotry first, though, and then Wrath and Zealotry as a second combination for the Merc. But yeah, this is basically the Merc setup. It's pretty straightforward stuff. Okay, and that's pretty much it for the build. Where do I go from here with this build? Pretty much Mage Blood. That's all I can think of. Like, there are definitely optimizations we can make in certain things, and we'll do exactly that. But at this stage, this build slaps really hard, and it's a lot of fun, just absolutely nuking everything in the end game to the point where it's getting trivial, which is awesome. That's always my goal for playing affordable builds. My next build I want to do after this one, I'm thinking of Blade Trap of Greatsword with the Ricatas on a Slayer. So let me know if you want to see me try and attempt that. I don't have any POB at this point. No one's really playing it like that, so I'm going to have to come up with something, which is going to be fun. But hopefully it works. But anyway, if you like this video, don't forget to like and sub to the channel, the Twitch, everything else good in between. I hope to be on stream later. If not, I'll definitely be on stream tomorrow night. But until next time, and also Baron and I will be doing another podcast tonight. So the Coffee and Chaos podcast, so episode 4 will be coming out. We'll be talking about Path of Exile, the Mercs expansion and everything in between, and the up and coming news around Path of Exile 2. Also, for those of you who are here for Path of Exile 2, I'll be putting out new Path of Exile content hopefully in the next week once we get announced information, things like that. A bingo card, so let me know what you want on the bingo card. I might put a post in the community post section. We'll have a talk about that. And anyway, yeah, I'll see you guys next time and have a good one.